I am in favor of universal, non-discriminatory, verifiable nuclear disarmament. Let's all disarm. But until such time as that disarmament has been achieved, Iran or any other country has as much the right to have nuclear weapons as the United States has. Who are the countries who ever used nuclear weapons? We're told Iranians are Muslims. They're mullahs. They wear funny turbans. They cannot be trusted because they don't look like us. They don't come in a dinner jacket and black tie. They don't. That's true. But that's really absolutely no reason to discriminate against them. The only country that has ever used nuclear weapons is the United States of America. Used them over Japan. Not to secure Japan's surrender, because that was inevitable. The Soviet Union had defeated Japan in Manchuria, and Japan was well on the way and begging for peace because Japan's time was up. The bomb was used against Japan for basically to make two things sure. That Japan would surrender only to the United States and not to the Soviet Union. So there will not be any socialism in the eastern part of the world. That came anyway through China. Second reason was to actually issue a warning to the Soviet Union, because the United States alone had the possession of the nuclear weapons. If you don't behave, that's what will happen to you. It didn't happen because 4 years later the Soviet Union exploded the bomb, the Chinese Revolution succeeded, etc. So to say that others are irresponsible, but the United States of America is responsible, when the only country that has shown the irresponsibility of committing mass murder through the use of this horrible weapon, nuclear weapons, is the United States. So I put it to you, there's no reason for waging war against anyone. Secondly, we are told we want to bring democracy. Now, you really insult your audience's intelligence if you say you want to bring democracy. Why not bring democracy to Israel, where the Jewish population oppresses the Palestinian population? Why not bring democracy to Saudi Arabia, where actually they beat women up if they go and have a little drive around the country? Why not take democracy to all kinds of Egypt and Tunisia are lovely good places. Now, isn't it wonderful to be speaking in this chamber when the whole of the Middle East is actually blowing up in the face of the stooges of imperialism, and you don't find Western spokesmen going saying, wonderful, there's a revolution going on. There were some street demonstrations a couple of years ago in Iran, and they were saying, oh, how wonderful that Twitter is being used, Facebook is being used. I don't even know the names of these social sites. My son doesn't tell me. But anyway, what a wonderful thing. And now the thing is turned the other way around. What has happened is people are using these technologies to communicate and get rid of autocracies that have oppressed the peoples of the Middle East for 30, 40, 50 years. I am in favor of that kind of liberation. It's nothing to do with human rights, it's nothing to do with democracy. Imperialism strives for domination, it does not strive for freedom. Freedom is no concern of it. It's basically a question of what they can get out of it. In 1948, a great cold warrior of the United States, a diplomat, George Kennan, had this to say. He said, we have 50% of the world's wealth, but only 6.3% of its population. In this situation, our real job in the coming period is to maintain this position of disparity. To do so, we have to dispense with all sentimentality. We should cease thinking about human rights, the raising of living standards, and democratization. And if I can bring in one of our homespun George Kennans, not so long ago, a few months ago, sometimes last year, our defense secretary, Dr. Liam Fox, said, and he said that in Afghanistan, we are not in Afghanistan to mend the education system for girls of a 13th century broken down country. We have real interest. Now the statement of George Kennan and of Liam Fox, cynical though these statements may be, are far better guide to the policy of imperialism than actually hundreds of lying articles that are put in the Financial Times and the Daily Mail and the Sun. We have real interests, and these real interests are of domination, cornering other people's resources and finding avenues of investment. Imperialism seeks the maximum of profit. That is what it's actually doing. War, I put it to you, one of the greatest writers on military affairs, a German called Clausewitz wrote, war is a continuation of policy. Before you actually discuss what that war is about, you have to ask the question, which class is waging the war and against whom. Secondly, what was the policy of that class for years and decades before it waged the war? And I put it to you, Britain's interest in Afghanistan has never been that of human rights. Britain has been waging war against Afghanistan for well over 100 years, with very bad results. If I walked every day into a brick wall, I think I'll have to be dim-witted not to realize that I should stay away from the war. For Britain to go back again and again to get the same punishments and put working class people in soldiers' uniforms and to ask them to go and get killed for British imperial interests when there's nothing for them to gain, I think is horrible. I am not against British working people. I actually do not want them to kill themselves in the interest of British imperialism. If they're going to kill, if they're going to make sacrifices, let them do so in their own interest. Let them fight for socialism. It's a racket. We had a huge, horrendous crisis. We are still in the middle of it. The biggest crisis for 80 years, economic crisis. It's a crisis of overproduction, as it happens periodically under the conditions of capitalism. Capitalism cannot function without having crisis of overproduction. So much of what is produced goes to the employing class that there's not enough for the working class to actually buy the goods that are produced. So we are actually regularly having these. It's a lunatic system. People in the olden times used to starve because there wasn't enough food. Today they starve because there's too much food. People in the olden days didn't have clothing because there wasn't enough clothing. Today, in those parts of the world where they don't have clothing, it is because there is too much clothing. They go cold because too much coal is produced and coal cannot be sold. Now, this is actually propagated by the economists and professors at universities as the best system. I put it to you, compared with that, voodoo magic and belief in virgin birth are almost epitomes of the highest standard of scientific achievement. It's not a very good economics. So that being the case, it is really very important for us to say, it's very important for us to say, this is really not a war that is being fought in our interest. War is a continuation of policy. Britain's policy, the policy of the United States, is to dominate the world, to exploit the whole world. And we should not be in the business of doing that. And in view of that, I would ask you, I would plead with you to oppose the motion, not because we are anti-English. We are against the imperialist ruling class, which puts other people's lives in danger. The soldiers are fighting there. In this economic crisis, what has happened? The bankers have had a bailout. 800 billion pounds has been spent in either giving guarantees to them or bailing them out. The government has given these guarantees, therefore the government is bankrupt. And the government is now trying to recoup that money by taxing ordinary people more and taking away their social benefits and bringing in cuts of 81 billion over the next 4 years. So working people are getting the sack. And the bankers are back to merrymaking. They've distributed 7 billion pounds of bonuses last year alone. And the very banks that have been nationalized, that you, the taxpayers, have paid for them. Now, it's not a system, it's not a government, it's not the kind of people for whom I want mine or my children's life to be wasted. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brar. We now